All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025 meeting of the New London Planning Board. Just a reminder that we are recording, so you can watch it later for the highlights. Thank you for coming out on a lovely summer night. It's been a minute since we've had a meeting, so it's good to see everybody. You want to do that update first while we get...
Sure.
Does that make sense? Adam's going to do a quick update.
Sure.
And we'll talk about Bar Harbor.
So I'm sure that everybody has seen all of the things that the governor finally signed last week that we will be needing to deal with. There are many bills that became law that will impact our work. NHMA just released a whole bunch of guidance today. So I think I've read most of them. Haven't necessarily put together our game plan yet, but stay tuned on those. We will need to make some provisions in what we are planning for next year's zoning amendments. A couple of the things, like the accessory dwelling unit, were relatively unique, where they had an effective date of July 1st, 2025, even though they were not signed until July 15th. And so obviously that is somewhat rare. In addition, typically those kinds of bills have a year lag time so that we can go through the zoning amendment process and bring our zoning ordinance up to compliance. That doesn't exist this year, so we are trying to figure that out. We can no longer use a conditional use permit process for accessory dwelling units. So accessory dwelling units will not be coming to the planning board anymore as part of their process. So, we've got to figure out in the interim until we get the zoning ordinance changed how that looks. So stay tuned. It's sort of live breaking, and we are figuring all of that out. And we will probably pick back up with our parking discussions sometime in the next couple of meetings.
You can use the mic, thanks.
In other words, what's on the book stands. No, it doesn't. So
No,
they've
not this
abrogated
time.
that.
Yep, so the law went into effect July 1st, and so the portions of our ordinance that are out of compliance are essentially rendered void. The part that I'm not entirely sure what to do with is that all of our provisions of the accessory dwelling unit section are under the conditional use permit. And so if we can no longer use the conditional use permit, what does that do to those standards in the meantime? Because many of those standards we still have the ability to regulate in some capacity, and in some ways they still are able to be regulated in the same capacity. We just need to change the format of how it's in the ordinance. So whether or not in the next 9 months we have the ability to continue with those pieces, I'm not sure, and that's where we're trying to figure that out right now. There was a change to the definition of how you can count occupants in a dwelling unit by bedroom and dwelling unit, and barring the use of a familial connection as your sort of point of reference. As you probably know, in our family definition, we use, for one family, two family, multifamily as part of that. We have a definition that equates to no more than 5 unrelated individuals. So presumably we need to work on that. And so we'll figure out how to change those things to come into compliance. The parking portion, I don't believe, other than the accessory dwelling unit portion, that there's anywhere in the actual zoning ordinance where we dictate the parking required. The rest of our parking regulations fall under the site plan review regulations. So we have the ability to adapt to those more quickly. Obviously, we started down that path a few months ago, and then when this bill seemed like it was going to torpedo any efforts that we were making to go to like 1.25, this has now dropped it to 1, that it was wasted time. So we'll work on that, and we'll continue to dig through. There's a pile of bills that municipalities are having to deal with this year. So, we're in our early stages of making our lists and figuring out what our priorities are. So I assume every day for the next couple of weeks we are going to get stuff from NHMA for, they're giving out their guidance as quickly as they're able to work on it in chunks. So stay tuned.
Do they offer any workshops to planning boards or zoning boards to sort of round up and discuss it so that people have a pretty good grip on it?
It doesn't fall well timed to this particular instance. The spring zoning conference that I always
okay.
sort of share with you guys is right after, because the terms typically run with town meeting. Some towns elect their planning board members, and so obviously we appoint them, and it coincides with elections, but the state runs their conferences right after that cycle. There is usually a fall conference. I shouldn't say there is usually. Some years there's a fall conference, and it's highly dependent on what funding is available. So this year, I'm not sure what to think. I can check on that for you, and certainly let you guys know. Sometimes there's a series of webinars at lunchtime that they go into these things. You're certainly welcome to participate in those. I typically participate, so I'm happy to sort of relay the information if you have more fun lunch plans. But yes, they do their best to get information out to us, and then we also typically utilize a consult with town council as well.
Is there a specific website we can follow?
Yep, I will send out the and I think I have it open right now, so I can show you what it looks like. Nope, that's not it. Well, I thought I had the municipal associations. There's a bulletin with all their guidance, and they just sort of add all the guidance to it
Okay.
as it comes available.
Point? So the effect of this is, has it nullified our present ordinance?
In at least some manners, yes. Deciphering to what extent is what we're working on right now.
Okay.
Thanks, Adam, for the update. That's helpful. Okay, so let's jump back to the agenda. We're going to talk to Bar Harbor about their conceptual. This is a conceptual discussion about their plans for their 321 Main Street location, which you'll recall is next to the forthcoming daycare facility. So if you want to come on up and introduce yourself, and if you can just flip on the mic so that it's green, that'd be great so we can hear you. Hello, if you can just hit that button on the mic, that'd be great. Perfect.
Testing.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, members of the New London Planning Board. I'm Jason with TF Moran, project manager. I actually grabbed the wrong easel, so would you mind if I tried to use a chair
Not at all.
to post it? Sorry about that.
Yeah, go for it. Yep. Sure.
I'm going to hand this out as well, just so you can see a little bit better.
Yeah. And Adam's got it up on the screen too. You can do every other if you want. You can share. You can share with him.
And
That's fine. We keep going.
I also have extra copies, so if there's
Thank you.
I printed extras.
Thomas Moran, we're officially TF Moran. Just a local civil engineering group. Try this. So, thanks for that. So I didn't meet with you I was involved with the school project, the design of that, and my firm obviously was. This is the property, if you're not familiar with the property, it's the property to the north. Okay, this was, it's a quarter of an acre. This is right at the corner of Pleasant and Maine. You're all familiar with the location. It's right, you throw a stone probably and hit it from here. So we are looking and we're working with Bar Harbor to basically redevelop that with a smaller branch, smaller, newer branch that fits what their needs within the village are going to be for the foreseeable future. Updating the equipment, downsizing, the scale of the building. The existing building is roughly 4,500 square feet, and it pretty much occupies the whole property, which on the plan that the color plan, the existing building is approximately, it's underlain underneath. So the existing building is here. It's pretty much the whole property. And there's a parking lot and a driveway that's really wide on Pleasant Street. Goes back and connects to in a larger parking lot on a different parcel that has since been, or in the process of being sold. I'm not sure where that stands officially. I know they're planning on closing. That'll be transferred to the school and separated so that there's no, so Bar Harbor essentially will just retain this small piece in the center of town. And that existing facility doesn't have any drive-through. It has a walk-up ATM, I believe. And I believe there's access off of Main and the parking lot in the rear. There's a stairway up into the building. It kind of sits. So this plan will demo that parking, disconnect the the existing cross access through the properties between here and Gould Street. And there is no driveway that crosses through, it doesn't matter, but essentially there's no existing driveway from the southern property that went across. So there was an old house there. Anyways, this will essentially involve the development of a smaller branch bank, also with no drive-through, roughly 2,100 square feet, walk-up ATM, small parking field, as we show here. I think we have 10 spaces, and new facades to redevelop this property. And we're talking about essentially we're gonna be, I don't know the number, but we're we're making it a lot greener. It's non-conforming. Even in this concept, it's over the limit by a small degree. However, there's an existing sidewalk that the city runs to town. And if you were to discount that sidewalk, which essentially conforms to the green space requirement, so there's this existing sidewalk that runs, as well as a sidewalk along Pleasant Street, but that sidewalk is in the city right away, town right away. The other sidewalk is on the property. So I'll be asking for a waiver to redevelop the site, exceedance of just to be a small amount over the coverage requirement with because of partly if you take the sidewalk out, the existing sidewalk, it's conforming. And in order to get the reasonable use that we're looking to do here in terms of the building footprint and the amount of parking and stuff, the layout works well with the plan that I'm showing you now. So we'd have the building here. This is Main Street, Pleasant. A new, this would be a customer access for basically pedestrian off of Main in this location with a walkway in, ATM here, exterior ATM access. Then you go up Pleasant. The curb cut now is from here to here. We're gonna create 2 driveways, one new for us, for the 9 spaces, and then one for the abutting property to the, I think it's a yoga studio. So that may need a waiver for driveway separation, but it cleans this up a lot. Currently, there's a super wide curb cut. They have no rights of access onto our property. We are gonna preserve their access to their parking, and then we're gonna obviously retain our own access. So that's just something that is, I wanted to mention. And I think it'll look nice. It's gonna be a New England style. So here's what they generally look like. This is what we did in Bedford. That's a veneer, stone veneer, hardy plank, New England architecture. This one had a standing seam roof on it. So this is the color palette and the architectural styling that we're looking to do. Corporate. Most likely it'll look similar to this. That one is 2019. And let's see together. Here's just the non-color version of the elevation view from Main Street. There's the ATM. You walk in and the entry is in this alcove here. So that's Main Street elevation. This is from, looking from, Main Street would be here. So this is looking south. You got the proposed signage on the building, and the color will be, like I said, similar to the colors I presented. Here is from Strawberry Blossom. So, and then this would be from the new parking lot, main entry. That's the back. Yeah, looking at it from the, so that would be the east elevation, looking west from the parking lot. And there's a small office, only a few offices. We don't need a lot of parking. Other than that, like the waivers I can see are, like I mentioned before, those 2. And then the snow storage, I know you guys, as you should, there's a lot of snow up here. Focused on that as well, and we're gonna store the snow. I think we have enough area without a waiver. I think it's 20%. So basically around this perimeter here is where I wanna plow the snow and store it off the edge. There will be a curb and everything because of drainage, but, so I'm gonna store snow around the perimeter, and we exceed the 20%. And speaking of drainage, we're gonna just be a simple sewer service. I met with the water department as we were doing with Strawberry Blossom, and we have a conditional, basically, approval for the flow. And they're actually credited for their existing, and it's actually a downsize of the use, so there's no issues with water. It's sewer, yeah. And we'll have just a service connection, gravity. And then drainage will be actually greatly improved. This whole property, if and when viewed with the Blossom School, that all kind of ran off in the existing. There was a swale north of the old parking lot that just captured the water from going onto the abutter. It didn't do anything with treatment. It just ran into the street onto Gould Avenue. So that whole site we designed, and I was a part of, we're capturing, and we weren't allowed to infiltrate because the test pits are not, there's a high water table. But we did filter all that. So in conjunction with that project, this project will also capture most of the runoff and filter it similarly, although I'm doing here, we want to do, because of the real estate, the small size, an underground chamber system, almost like a leach field for stormwater. And it's basically in this area here, it'll be collected in a catch basin and piped into that and then treated with an underdrain, and then it discharges into the street where it currently runs. So there'll be a net, two things will happen from just this project, but in conjunction with that other project. I'm not taking credit for that project, but we're gonna have a huge increase in water quality treatment, and a reduction to some degree, I don't know what degree, but a measurable reduction in the peak flow to the network. So it'll be a positive influence on the storm drain. So you're having a positive influence for many reasons: aesthetics, organization of driveways and circulation, increased green space, among other things, and landscaping. But so that's it in a nutshell. Don't want to speak too much, but just wanted to hit the main points. And yeah, I'm just seeking any feedback that you guys may have or questions. Thank you.
Sure. From a technical standpoint, I wonder if now is the time to engage with NHDOT on the discussion of the parallel spaces in front of the bank. That if now is a good time to consider, I mean, obviously that intersection has issues that need to be dealt with on a longer term safety-wise. I do wonder if the reduction in width would help with the pedestrian crossings, and if we were able to bring those spaces out and keep them in line with the spaces on Main Street that are to the east of it, and align better with the crosshatched area to the west in front of the Kidder building, if that would help to narrow the intersection.
Are you talking like along Pleasant Street here?
No, on Main Street in the
Okay.
front. So I believe historically, I have very vague memories of this, so maybe someone else can tell me if I'm wrong, but there was angle parking in front of the bank way back,
Correct.
right? Okay. So when this parking went from being angled to parallel, obviously it left a much wider street, which created a longer crossing, and then they moved the crossing up to by the telephone pole above the bank to the municipal lot. But it also created a lot of pavement there, so that when cars are waiting for various turning movements, the car behind them is impatient and then goes around them, and then in the other three legs of the intersection, there are crosswalks, and it's not a great pedestrian environment. So I guess I'm wondering if this is a time where we talk to DOT about, what could be done to potentially make some minor modifications as a part of this project to this intersection that may be beneficial to, the town.
There is actually, I didn't mention, a space that we most likely lose off of Pleasant as well as a part of that new driveway configuration. It'll mess or encroach on one existing parallel space on Pleasant Street. So that's also in play.
Okay. And then the only other remark I have after this is just more of a general remark that, I know that you are designing for your clients' needs, and, we certainly can't force any property owner to go a particular way. But this is probably the most vocal intersection in town that has a historic feel to it. And this is probably one of the most valuable walkable parcels in town. And so to the extent that they think outside the box to potentially mixed use. There's a whole nother layer of issue there with utility provisions and things, but I would encourage them to think more broadly, a two-story building with a couple of offices upstairs, or a couple of apartments, or something that keeps the streetscape of a quaint New England village with, almost all of our buildings in that section are 1.5 to 1 3/4, 2-story finished upstairs. Obviously, this one historically was not, when it was a grocery store originally, right? And so, it's always been that way, but now's the opportunity to sort of think about what presence that has on the street. Obviously, directly next door on Strawberry Blossom, the building that preceded that was also, that sort of quintessential 2-story use, and that's going back to a single story too. So ultimately, we can't, force that, just suggesting that that's something to think about as we try to, sort of maintain the character in the historic Main Street. I think New London residents have a love of Main Street, and then Newport Road is sort of accepted that it looks a little bit more plaza-like, with single-story, low-density development. So to the extent that they can think about that and think outside the box, I think the community would appreciate that.
Is that approved in it's an approved use, would be a mixed use development? Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Obviously, it has parking ramifications,
Sure.
and I understand that, but I think to go through the exercise would
Yeah, I can
value.
definitely bring that up, that's something that was
Yeah, because as
Consideration.
Adam said, it's such an important intersection in town, and that building, the current building, is actually pretty, I think it dates to the 1800s, right? It's pretty old.
I'm not sure.
I know it was a grocery store, but I think it's like pre-Civil War era. I think it's actually quite old. So, to lose that and have something that feels a lot more suburban, I think may rub people the wrong way. I understand it's like vaguely New Englandy, but it also has like
We could potentially incorporate some type of historical element into our architecture that would preserve that integrity or what have you. In terms of going forward with, let's say we just go forward with this proposal, we could potentially add elements, that would make it more historical looking than suburban looking.
Yeah,
Or,
I mean, it would be worth thinking about. I think the current version feels very, kind of Bedford or something like that. It feels very suburban, and doesn't quite maybe stand up for the ideal here, I guess. And then, yeah, I would agree with Adam too. My first thought was, I know it's a tougher row to hoe, but because the Kidder building across the street and because the library across the street from that, they're all a couple stories, that just the scale of that, and then you have the inn nearby, like the scale is just very different there. So, yeah, it would seem like a great opportunity to have something upstairs. There were other questions on the board. Yeah, Joe?
Could you talk about your destruction schedule or rebuilding schedule relative to the school next door? Are you guys going to be working at both properties at the same time, or what's that going to be like?
Well, that project's been approved, and basically, as I understand, they're starting. My last understanding was that was going to be a 2025 build with a 2026 opening. We haven't got an approval, so I don't believe our schedule will be a 2025 build for this project.
Okay, thank you.
At this point, we're kind of up against it. It's almost fall. By the time we get through the board with you guys, it's going to be a while, and then we're looking at, it's going to be, so it's most likely going to be after the school's open.
I just wanted to go back to Adam's point, as someone, that's my access to town. The sightline is terrible. I've seen many, many close calls. The combination of the sightline and the crosswalk is terrible, and I'm looking and I'm saying, well, I know you can't move this back 10 feet, but I think putting a big leafy tree on that corner is
Okay.
not going to help the situation, and it's already bad. I don't have a solution. Personally, I think losing those parking spaces out to being on Main Street is almost going to make it worse, but I am, if you and your client can be involved in thinking about that, I think it would be a major help to walking downtown
Now,
and
we are, oops, just go ahead. I'm sorry.
and to traffic. In the morning, sorry, 8
All right.
o'clock or whatever, there's always 4 or 5 cars backed up wanting to turn left on Pleasant Street coming toward, the north or the south. And the screech of brakes is very common. And there's people trying to cross that crosswalk and trying to cross to the library. The library crosswalk is totally misplaced in terms of people not just trying to cross the street. So I think there's a lot there to think about, and I don't have a solution, but I just,
Sure.
it would be wrong to sit here and say, this is going to help it.
I would say, and I didn't say, that we are setting back the front on Main Street Yeah, it's set back at least 5-6 feet further from where it currently is, so it's gonna
It is that,
be
okay.
a new project. We're pulling it back from both roads. We're pulling it back from Main Street by approximately 6 feet and off of Pleasant 10 feet. So it's gonna be recessed into that corner better. But I do see that this tree, and we can look at our landscape and see how that looks at the sight lines. But I do think we'll have less traffic when we're done. It's a smaller building. There's less employees proposed. And banks aren't really open, on peak hours. On the
I don't
weekdays,
think your
so-
traffic is a problem. I've been.
But
in-
I appreciate the feedback on those.
I would just
We'll look into
also
that.
second Adam and Tim of saying, I'm sorry about that. I don't know what that.
No problem.
This is a well-positioned property, and I think if we had a developer, come in, they would see the opportunity to place a second story, either for housing or for some kind of office or whatever. So I would encourage you to look at that.
Thank you.
Janet, you had a comment?
Mainly, I was going to bring up the housing. We desperately need it. And I think that if the bank is thinking about renovating this building, which needs it, that we certainly would appreciate having a second floor with maybe 1 or 2 apartments. With regard to the parking, I think if you could visualize the fact that people who park on Main Street to go into the bank, when they pull out, if someone who is on Main Street is going to turn right, there's a real issue with 2 cars abreast of each other, one pulling out into traffic and then turning right, and then the other people trying to go straight. So I'm not sure what the solution is to the corner, but I think I would get rid of, if you can, the last parking space closest to Pleasant Street. And if David Royal were here, I know he'd
What was that? Sorry, I didn't, are you talking about,
The 3 on Main Street, if you could eliminate the last one that's closest to Pleasant Street, closest to the intersection.
so you want us to try to delete parking on Main Street?
Correct.
Okay.
Because it's a real issue with people pulling out after they've been at the bank, and other people who are coming down Main Street either turn right or go straight, but then you have
It's
2
blocking their
cars.
sight line, you're
Yeah,
saying.
it's-
When you're traveling west, trying to turn out, it's cutting off, it's interfering with.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
So, and the other thing is, I definitely emphasize a second floor if that's possible with apartments.
Thank you. How does that, not that we're gonna talk about it, what the complications with the town's water system and the capacity, I mean, that's maybe getting the cart before the horse, so, does that, my understanding is there's no water, so, or there won't be, but that's not something we need to get into tonight, because that's not the question that was asked, so.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's a conversation, if the property owner is interested in exploring, that has to happen, upfront with the water precinct. As you said, the existing building here, I think has a larger usage than what I picked up. So whether or not there is an ability to absorb additional and make it equal, I'm not sure, but,
Okay.
but that could be a conversation. As far as the alignment of the spaces goes, I mean, and I really do wonder that if this were to be pulled out and to be in line with the rest of Main Street, if you could actually preserve the number of spaces just by the efficiency of pulling it out, because we have a lot of area crosshatched on either side of the crosswalk.
You're talking about realigning the parking to maintain the existing
Right,
count.
instead of the sort of jog in and keep the sidewalk straight down Main Street to the Pleasant Street intersection.
Yeah,
It's a larger conversation, obviously, with DOT, and I know that that's not always the smoothest process when projects are looking to get off the ground. But I think we'd be making a mistake if we didn't at least engage them.
From a safety standpoint too, if you narrowed the road there, that would really do a lot. Slow traffic, as you know, and to address Janet's points about two cars being abreast of each other and all that, I think it would do a lot.
okay.
It could also potentially help improve the sight lines for Paul coming out of Pleasant, because if the intersection alignment comes out closer to the actual turning movement area, the stop bar could be pulled out in front of Artisans and the bank.
Yeah,
Obviously,
not to belabor this, but the problem is the cars and the crosswalk. You can't turn left without almost being through the crosswalk. And,
saying, if you moved it out, you could do that.
well, I don't know where you're going to move the crosswalk.
Well, if you moved the sidewalk out and the crosswalk got moved out more,
With the cars there, you still,
yeah.
because essentially we'd be having to realign the sidewalk to area that we have crosshatched on the pavement.
Right.
So that it really extends the front yard of both the Kidder Building and the bank in order for everything to align.
Is this coming back into here, you're saying, that's the crosshatch, so the travelway is back here, our parking is way up here. This is that void you're talking about. This space right in here is that pocket.
Yep.
You're saying where that right turn traffic is, so you guys are saying clean this up.
And currently, if you're coming from Paul's house, the stop bar is all the way back here, really, right?
You could even move, I don't want to get too crazy, because this is all, I mean, we could pull the sidewalk and this into the road and align it with the existing sidewalk.
Right,
Get more green
that's what I'm
space
suggesting, right.
Okay.
And so obviously it would take a realignment of the sidewalk on the Artisans Kidder Building side too, because the crossing here would be pushed forward, but it's all,
Right.
right. But that could hopefully bring the stop bar further out so that you could see past the crabapple tree at the front of the Artisans display, and then bring it closer to the street. Correct.
yeah, interestingly, the sight line on the right is much better than on the left.
Yep. And, I
Yeah, 'cause
think,
this is the turn that's gonna be the most dangerous, will be turning left.
Right.
And seeing traffic coming at you.
Right.
and I think narrowing that intersection further up the hill, so to speak, it's easy to gain speed from here to the bank, and then all of a sudden, the road narrows and you've got tree cover and it feels very congested, and so we naturally slow down there. If we could push that slowdown point to the other side of the intersection,
Right.
so that hopefully traffic passing through the intersection, we're traveling a little bit slower when there's pedestrian potential conflict points. I think that would be great.
Is
Yeah,
that,
I was gonna say, do you have
is
insight
that
on this, Aaron?
remote to this project? Is that off my frontage? I lost that last thought of yours, that last point you made about it.
I'm sorry.
He was saying, like, as you go further down the road, past that, you get to where we don't have that extra wide parking area, and then there's a natural slowdown because you have more trees along the street, so you get just the natural effect of people feeling as though the road is narrower. It's not actually narrower there, but it just gives the perception, and people naturally slow down. And Adam's point was, if you could pull the sidewalk out from the current position to narrow the street at Pleasant and Main, you would start that slowdown
Calming
earlier.
traffic,
It'd be a
yeah.
traffic calming measure, right? Aaron is an expert in this, can probably talk to this.
Well, I have so many good ideas, but my one thought is, it looks like that's the state right away, correct? Okay, so I would love to do bump outs. This actually goes hand in hand with a concern I have about this project. The main thing with bump outs is plowing. A lot of people don't like it, a lot of agencies don't. For Main Street, is that maintained by the town or the state?
It's
That
maintained
is
by the
state.
state.
So that would be potentially a hard sell depending, but bump outs would solve a decent amount of this. It would help with those sight lines, it would bring the stop bar out, all of that. I'm not sure that changes anything for this, but I love that idea, and it creates little, like, it's been, now when everyone's kind of working on more downtown areas, it's all about more of the feel of a downtown, and having, even though it's kind of counterproductive to have more sidewalks sometimes, more concrete, everything else, you actually are creating enough width to be ADA compliant, and still in front of artisans, you can have like a little seating area, you can have that, and it becomes this like place to go instead of place to walk through. And this is, in the civil engineering world, a huge push to do. So I love that idea.
And even if we couldn't go full permanent bulb out here, and we just had to keep the curb straight, but closer to Main Street,
Yeah.
Sam and I have looked at that intersection quite a bit for temporary seasonal bulb out installations. There's some, planters and,
Yep.
and different things that you can use that at some point we would like to implement, sort of one project at a time. But this intersection particularly, we've thought, from late April through October could benefit from a seasonal installation, even if permanent was not desirable from
I agree.
HDOT.
And there are a lot of options. I do have a question on Pleasant Street. I understand that there's a utility pole, and that's probably why that second island is there. But that, plowing-wise, is that a concern? Has anyone talked to, like, that is right in line, and I know on-street parking during the winter typically isn't allowed for a period of time for this exact reason. So that was a concern.
Yep.
I think we've touched on sightlines. Constructability-wise, that building is adjacent to that sidewalk. I was trying to look in picture and Google, and it looks like there's at least some grass growing, so they're probably not actually attached, but you're showing that sidewalk. I understand it's in the town's right of way or whomever. But you're showing no impact to that sidewalk on Pleasant, and I just question that, I guess. And then the other thing, kind of going back to the sight lines, because they should be improved with the 10-foot offset, assuming that tree is not in the way. The thing that I think is worth noting that wasn't obvious to me at first glance is that the driveway is actually about 30 feet closer to the intersection. And I understand there won't be a ton of traffic on this. However, I don't know, like, I was kind of looking at the NHDOT, I know this is a town road, but I was just curious what their standard commercial driveway offset from an intersection is, and it's substantially more. Obviously, this is a town road. I may have just missed it. I don't know if we have regulations for that. And if so, just the fact that we're about 30 feet closer, if that's going to be a concern.
Public Works has not reviewed these yet. When we
Okay.
actually get an application,
know some
they
of this
would.
is-
Yep. I'm trying to, on this plan, the shadow of the existing building is on here, right? So
Yep.
okay, so right here.
So you've
So
got-
it's the in essentially is the closer, the outside is.
It's actually about the out, because currently, traffic is coming in right in line with the.
Basically
the-
centered on the property line, it looks like,
Yeah, exactly.
On the
And
blue
so by the
line.
time you kind of do the math, it's about 30 feet is what I was approximating. It's,
Okay.
once again, not a huge deal, but it's just a matter of, with already a dangerous intersection, I just wanted to make sure that that was noted.
that was what I was mentioning, not that point, but the waiver for the two driveways, because we're creating two curb cuts.
Yeah.
Where there's one huge one now, we're reorganizing that. So that whole design is, that property has no right of access through our site, and therefore they've no parking agreement as well. So we are gonna redefine their driveway.
And just for anyone who doesn't know, like, working on NHDOT projects, we would never be allowed to have the super wide opening that it's existing now. It's not safe for pedestrians, so what the design is actually much more desirable, much safer for pedestrians, so that part is wonderful.
And we are working with Eversource. It is really beyond the conceptual discussion, but we may not do that because, like you said, it is sticking out into the road. I may have to just reset the pole somewhere, and we're in discussion with them on where that ends up going. But we have opportunities along our internal yard to relocate that.
Adam, could you bring up the overhead? My recollection, which could be wrong, is that there are 3 curb cuts before you get to Gould? Or there would be if,
It's really 2, right?
2
Because
now, I'm saying,
There would
will
be
there be
because-
3?
Right, because Kristen Angeli would maintain access to her parking spaces. So essentially, this would be a green space, and she would still have her driveway on her property.
I'm saying the gutter
And then-
company still has it.
Right, and then Lauren and Sam Chadwick have this access here to their property. And as part of the Strawberry Blossom application, you'll remember that the Chadwicks maintained an out on this side, but they no longer have ingress.
I think you're confirming my question. We're going to go from two curb cuts to 3 now?
Yes.
Correct.
In that block.
South side.
I use that ATM, and it's very convenient to park on Main Street to access it. Is there any way that the ATM could be not on Main Street, on a different side of the building, and then the parking on Main Street could be less essential? I mean, there's access to the building in the quote-unquote back. And I just wonder if, thinking about some of their other bank locations, if the location of the ATM could be reconfigured.
I can look into that. And what would be the purpose?
Well, the parking on Main Street, if we were going to adjust the parking on Main Street to make it a safer intersection,
Sure.
I think certainly hours that the bank itself is closed, people are stopping at the ATM and pulling out from there is sometimes tricky and risky.
Yeah, we can look into that, definitely. I can't answer that tonight, but I made note of it.
And I have one other question. In terms of the interior plan, you may not have this, but the safe deposit box still going to be in that location?
It's proposed to be on the back corner, facing the school, on the back of the building. Here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
As far as what you'll leave Kristen Angeli's building with for circulation to get to her parking, this seems a little difficult. And though I understand you saying that she doesn't have a deeded easement the way that other properties on Pleasant do, the access to that building has used the existing pavement to access their parking and have their turning movements for the better part of a century at this point. And at some point, we're under common ownership, correct?
Right.
Right. And so, those things happened, without interruption, that I would question that she may actually have some rights to maintaining adequate ingress and egress. How someone would get into this space and back out and get back out to Pleasant Street is a little bit of a mystery to me, without backing out all the way. So though I get that your client has, their property and their interests, we also have to be sensitive to whatever site plan gets approved. Can't necessarily render her neighbors' provisions useless.
Well, we've given them access
Do you have the width
by
on that?
the driveway that's 18 feet wide. That's actually on our own property proportionally, so, that's a driveway that would be a town standard driveway into their existing parking facility. And, I understand the point you made, and there is no formal rights of access through our property or parking. And since if it does encumber our development, and to enable that type of, use to occur without any record or
But the
agreement,
property owner hasn't stopped that use from occurring for decades. So,
possibly.
I think that that's something that needs to be discussed.
And is that's a private matter then between private citizens and not a public matter before the town in many cases where you have private rights that conflict, or it wouldn't be necessarily a matter of the town to resolve a private legal matter
It wouldn't be the town's responsibility to necessarily resolve it between the two parties.
and I'm not trying to be
but-
argumentative at all.
Nope, but the planning board does have the responsibility of making sure that the plans that they approve are prudent, and, approving a plan that, makes a neighboring commercial site's parking unusable is obviously a problem. So to the extent that, we can help to mitigate that and to mediate that, that's our job.
So we could potentially demonstrate that the driveway to them is conforming to the town requirements in terms of the dimensional potentially as a,
The driveway to it is not necessarily the point. It's
Sure.
how are people getting in here and getting turned back around and getting it out. If you have a driveway to parking spaces that you can't use, the driveway is really pointless. So is there a shared parking lot that actually is a better, solution that results in less asphalt? Is there, I'm not sure what, but if you had a regular sized car and there was somebody also parked here, I don't think you're backing out of this space and turning around with the design.
got it. Thank you.
I don't understand, I don't know the answer to this, but we've talked a lot about the streetscape in Main Street, and this is central to it. And I just point out that the plan is going to back that off 6 feet, 8 feet from where it is at this time. And we're talking about moving that sidewalk. Were the sidewalk to happen, would the board feel that it would be a benefit to move the building closer to the street.
I think that that's something worth looking at, in my opinion. I think what it would boil down to is the intersection design and what maintained the improved sightlines. But I think you're right that, if we essentially make more front yard and move it back at the same time, right. Even though in space, we might actually only be a couple feet off. In perception, we'd be many.
Yeah, and that would go against we've talked about, it's a good point, Paul, because we talked about that with the school, and we talk about it certainly with the inn, like all of that architecture being close to the street has a traffic calming effect, and it is also favorable to walkability, because you don't feel like you're walking, like nobody would walk down Newport Road on purpose, but you would walk on Main Street, they just have such a different feel. So, yeah, so anything we can do to foster that. So I agree with you that if that changed, then we would want to rethink that, because we would not want to have a monster front yard, if you will, set back that would just be an invitation for people not to walk and to speed on by. Just my opinion. Oh yeah, I could do that. Yeah, Bob, do you have anything you want to chat about? Thank you, Adam, for the reminder. Sorry, I didn't mean to forget you there. We just have a small audience tonight. Do you mind if he grabs the mic from you?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
My question is sort of to him, but excuse me, and my name is Bob Bowers. I'm a resident of New London. On the west side along Pleasant Street, your property line shows the sidewalk where it's situated, but in looking at the sidewalk itself, it's not, I don't think, quite 5 feet wide, and if it is, it's right up against the building. I'm wondering if you or the planning board would consider an easement along there so that wide sidewalk could be a full 5 feet wide, which is good for handicapped accessibility and would not detract from the location of your building. It may take some of the green space, but that would allow the Department of Public Works to redo that sidewalk and have it consistent with the other sidewalks in town. Is that an easement like that? Would that be something you might consider?
You talking,
On the Pleasant Street, see you've got the sidewalk depicted?
yes.
And if you just visually look at it, it's a little bit thinner than the one in front of the bank.
Yes.
That, I think, is not quite 5 feet. I think it might be 3
Are
feet.
you saying we consider an easement to widen the existing
Yes, would you
sidewalk
consider an
to
easement
5 feet
allowing
along
it
Pleasant Street?
to encroach on the property, maybe a couple of feet?
Oh, we'd consider it.
Okay, that's,
Bob, there is a plan note here that says that the sidewalk on the other end is 5 feet, and it does look consistent size-wise.
I think it's possibly correct, yeah, that it's actually wider on Main.
I'm not,
It says it's 10 feet on Main Street, so it does definitely look wider there, but back here on this,
well, I'm not going to actually say I've measured it exactly, but if it came to the point where the town, through the DPW, thought that having a slight 1 or 2 foot easement would help in plowing and building a compatible sidewalk, I'm just asking if they would consider that, since it would not seem to impact on your design.
We would consider it.
That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Your other questions are interesting to me, but is that blue line your property line?
Yes.
So the sidewalk's on your property?
Yeah, that's the surveyed property line, the blue line.
Okay, so the parking they're talking about is on the other side of that, and it's state property or town
Yeah.
property,
On Main Street.
right?
Correct.
where we could potentially pull the parking out, right, it's within the DOT.
So that would be like Paul's question, if you actually move the sidewalk outside of their property line,
They would get.
they would have, as Paul, I think, suggested, the ability to move the building forward.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Okay.
arithmetically move kind of everything by that.
Right. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are there other questions or thoughts from the board?
I do.
Yeah, Janet.
Okay. I'm gonna, whatever the distance is between the parking in the bank's parking lot, the width in the parking lot off Pleasant Street, I think the width should be the same for the building next to it, for for Angeli's building. There is no way someone can back and turn and get out. It's more than an inch and a half on my ruler, and it's less than an inch for them. So I would rather see less green space, and you would give them a little bit additional space to back and turn to access their parking. Because there's no way we can approve something that will impact negatively.
So would you support a waiver then? We actually already need a waiver there's a 10-foot perimeter landscape requirement around parking lots. Would you support the waiver to reduce that in support of pavement?
I would, definitely.
So reduce the green on the east to widen the private abutters access.
Yes.
To what degree, just
Well,
as
what's the distance
appropriate?
between, in your parking lot for?
Well, that's the standard for the town, which is, we have 26 feet, which is actually pretty wide for most towns, so.
Well, it doesn't look like 26, I know it's not 26 feet.
We can look into it, definitely. We don't need to, I didn't mean to try to.
And I think the point is see some modeling for, if somebody has a full-size truck that is parked in those spaces, what is the turning movement to get out to make sure we're not approving something that renders it useless?
Right.
To Paul's point, though, if the sidewalk moves outside of your lot, you may actually be able to gain some green space by the fact that right now the whole front is impervious.
Yeah. And that also ties into kind of a lot of things, because it moves that driveway now closer again to the intersection. But per your comments, so that everything kind of has a ripple effect. So you gotta weigh everything together and see how it all molds and what gives us the best product. And then I come back to you with the overriding, how we can capture the most, significant items. And that's the point of this meeting, obviously. So.
I was going to say too, there was the one rendering you showed us of the other facility that was a two-story. I know that it's different than what you showed for your plans here, but just as you go back to your client, just to say, hey, like, we're interested in something more like that. Clearly, they've done it somewhere, so I'm just throwing that out there.
Yep.
The two-story.
Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Anybody? Okay. Do you have any questions for us? I think we've talked about a lot of things, but
I think so. I think,
lots of copious notes I've seen, so.
yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you coming and chatting with us about this.
Yeah, thank you as well. Try to make it easier once we get to that next step.
That's why we like the conceptual, because everybody can,
We're not spinning our wheels.
we're not spinning our wheels, and it's informal, but a lot of work can get done, so.
Absolutely. So,
yeah.
I thank you all for your input. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
So,
Appreciate
absolutely.
it. Thank you.
Yes.
Have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
All right, so next we are going to talk a little CIP. Right.
Okay. So it is that time of year where we jump into all the fun long-range planning again on the capital improvement program front. As most of you will remember, we halfway through last year's got access to the new software. So it wasn't super helpful last year in that we were using it sort of last minute. We were in a hybrid situation, hoping that it is more helpful this year and that we know it a little bit better to be able to utilize it a little bit more. The forthcoming buildings report is going to complicate what is in the CIP a bit. We are still, it is a long report that it's 90 pages of 11 by 17 spreadsheets for each building with, I don't even know, 40 rows on each page. And so Sam and I have been spending far more time than I would care to admit on this, reviewing this. And we are still in that process, hopefully have something for the selectmen in the next week or two. But obviously, there are projects from that report that should be brought into CIP. I'm not sure that everything that is identified in that report is going to be ready to be included in this year's CIP. Obviously, that report goes out for 30 years. CIP typically only goes out 10 years. So there's a lot of information in there in regular routine maintenance that is not pertinent to be immediately put in the CIP. And then there's just some things that are identified that, the consultants might have said we should go, this direction for an in-kind replacement on a building, but if we know that's not actually what the town, desires, that building hasn't been used that way for X number of years or whatever, we're not necessarily going to put that full replacement of a barn at the cemetery in the CIP, right? And so things like that will take further discussion that I think is probably going to happen in a longer term than we have to incorporate this year. So I think we'll focus probably on the 0 to 5 year things that are in there that need to be in the CIP. And then just the timing of this report is not perfect. So we will, I think, use it as much as we can to incorporate things for the various departments. And then each year, be adding in things as they become relevant in the time frame of the moving target. So Tim and I have talked a little bit about formatting CIP. I don't think we have, drilled down to anything in particular. One thing I've thought would be somewhat helpful this year would be to, in some ways, model after the Selectmen's Budget Jamboree Day, where all the departments give their budget presentations in one day. So the Selectmen end up with a holistic view of what the whole town budget looks like, and it's not, by the time you get to the 10th week of budget review, you've forgotten what the person on the first night really said that they wanted or needed anyways, that I'm wondering if we could do that in maybe like 2 mornings that were, like 2, 3, or 4 hour, meetings where we had as many departments as we could in a first section and, finish up the next one, or if we really thought we could get them in and out in a 4 or 5 hour, 7 to noon kind of thing. Maybe we could do that. I think sometimes we lose perspective in the CIP process when it's, you go through all of the public works stuff, and then you go through all the fire stuff, and then you go through all the police stuff, and by the time you get to the library, who remembers what we really needed for the fire truck? And so it can sometimes get lost, that maybe condensing it would be helpful. I don't know. I guess I'm looking for some feedback from folks and what your thoughts are on that.
I think it might be good, but I reflected on, I don't know, I think I've done it 5 or 6 years. And with the spreadsheets, and especially with the spreadsheets that you've come up with, our process created a lot of information, but, the departments have gotten so good at bringing them forward, and that we really weren't in a position to make any changes. I mean, my thought was I didn't know enough, and even listening to everything. And so I'm wondering, net, what our signature at the bottom really means, or what it should mean. Mm-hmm. And there's an element that the department heads feel like they should be heard, like on their budget, and I think that's worthwhile, and we should do it maybe anyway. But there's so much detail, and they've thought about so many things. We end up asking the same questions, and since we've asked them before, they have answers. And it seems to me that if there is a function that improves on that, we ought to focus on that if we can.
And I do think that sometimes we get caught in the CIP is sort of a complex plan in that it is entirely a advisory document. There's no funding attached to it. There's no commitment to it. Getting something in the CIP doesn't guarantee it gets in the budget or in a, right. And I think sometimes there's a misperception, especially, obviously there's a lot of focus right now on long-range planning and long-range financial planning for the town. And so I think sometimes there's confusion over when something falls in a specific year in the CIP that it's sort of guaranteed in that year. I think we plan for it to be in that year until we know otherwise, so that we're sort of setting things up, but it's no guarantee. So I think, to that point of Paul's, that, past CIP committees, I think have felt like it's important to show the selectmen and the budget committee all the things that are desired on the table, not necessarily to whittle them down for the selectmen and budget committee. Is that fair, Janet, do you think?
Yeah, the problem with it is that we propose like a new police station, but we have no money to attach to that. We have no idea what it's going to cost. And obviously, if we had done this in 2019, it would have been a lot cheaper than going forward and trying to build a new police station now. So a lot of those things are, they're guesses. And we can talk about how it's needed, but unless we actually put money aside for some of this stuff, it's not going to happen. And so you're torn between two things: keeping the tax rate low and planning for the future. And people who want to have a strategic plan for the future don't realize that we need to put money aside every year in the capital improvement programs for every department if we're going to achieve the goals that are stated in the capital improvement program.
It's hard to convince people of that.
Right, yeah.
If I could just elaborate a little bit more, Janet's statement. I think everybody's seen it. There's a lot of items, there's trucks, there's all these things. In my experience, we've not gone to the next level of saying, Sam, whoever it was, how many years can you put this off? It's just a number and it's in a certain year. And maybe that's a function that needs to be
Good point.
something we could do when we're spending our time.
And I think the department heads try to do that within their own subset of it. I think where we hit the conflict that we haven't necessarily looked at is when the fire department asks for something big the same year as or plans for something big the same year as the public works. And so, before they submit their spreadsheets to us, they're making sure that they're not putting the grader and the backhoe in the same year or whatever. But then turns out the grader and that ladder truck ended up the same year because they were sort of crossed. Right. So I think that is probably something we could look at. I'm not sure, what format, previously what we would do when we started is, you'd get sort of your working draft spreadsheets and we'd highlight the things that the department heads had changes for. The software doesn't really allow us to do that in the same way because it's not an Excel spreadsheet. It's a function of our overall budgeting software. So I'm not sure how we're going to communicate to you the things that either got completed or changed. That may end up being more of a verbal communication from the department head in person and just going down last year's and then what they're proposing for this year's. So that may look a little different. As far as just sort of a refresher for everybody, the CIP RSA gives the planning board the responsibility of completing the CIP unless you go to town meeting and designate an official CIP committee that's separate from the planning board. So we sort of take on a hybrid by doing a subcommittee of the planning board. So ultimately it's your full board. It comes back to us. We hold the public hearing, but knowing that these are typically morning and daytime meetings and that doesn't work in the whole board's schedule at all times, we've done subcommittee. That also allows us to have representation from the budget committee and the select board. And so though they're subcommittee members, ultimately those two members don't really get a vote in the actual adoption of the CIP because they're not the members of the planning board, and you all vote on that at the public hearing. So I believe BB is still willing to be the selectman's rep on the CIP. She is not going to be the budget committee rep this year. Rich Anderson is going to be, but Rich has not, this is obviously his first term. He has not lived through a municipal budgeting cycle yet. And BB felt like, having been through CIP, there was value in, doing it another time. So I think you're off the hook, Janet, if you're happy to be. And I know that Charlie Kelsey is willing to continue. I think this is Charlie's 4th year, maybe, from the budget committee. And he's been very helpful, and he is eager to participate again. I had that Paul Vance and Tim were willing too, but we also need to, in order to keep the subcommittee a 3 to 2 as far as it being mostly planning board members, since it's ultimately the planning board that has to approve it. We do need one more volunteer, if there's anybody interested. It is I would say it's not a huge commitment, but it's a short time period where there's regular meetings.
Yeah, it does go quickly, but it's just a sort of brief period of a decent amount of activity, but not crazy. We try to,
And we can let you think about it and
Yeah.
we can email Tim.
don't all email at once.
Frame for, like, from when to when are the meetings?
So we're a couple weeks behind right now. We've been sort of trying to figure out when we're going to have the building information because we didn't want to kick this off and then have to sort of dig everything up again when we had that. So ideally, August would be, let's see. So yeah, I mean, if we did, I think we've always done Fridays in the past. Friday mornings seem to work. So it would probably be like the 3 Fridays in a row, the 8th, the 15th, and the 22nd, if that worked for, enough people. And then typically we take a couple weeks off to, before and after Labor Day, to kind of allow for the backside of things to happen. And then in like that first week of September, the 5th, have another meeting to review the whole plan. And then the goal is always to get it to the planning board for public hearing by our first October meeting. So that gives us a little bit of a buffer. If we couldn't hit 3 Fridays in a row, we can stretch it into September a little bit. If we can do it in 1 or 2 meetings with the department heads, we're in even better shape. That being said, I don't know about what department head schedules look like right now. There's a lot of flux at the moment with just a lot of different things going on. So I think last year we had 5 2-hour meetings, or hour and a half. We met at 7. Yep, and we tried to be done by like 8:30 in the morning. But that is
It was helpful to meet early. I hate
Yeah.
to make you
Yep.
get up so early.
oh no,
but
I don't.
but
Believe me,
it
I'd
was-
rather come for a 7 a.m. meeting than
Yeah,
a 7 p.m.
right.
meeting any day of the week.
Yeah, 100%. It's also easier to meet before the day's gotten crazy,
Can, but they're in 2 different schools this year.
All right, well, we don't have to
Definitely
decide
bridges
that.
the start of the school year.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
We don't have to decide that this minute, but please think about it and let us know.
I have one other thing.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, actually, let's adjourn, or if you're okay.
Yeah,
with
yeah, no, totally. Okay, anything else from anybody? There's obviously no public comment. I just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thanks, everybody.